Welcome to this week's Cattle Call. I'm Susan Littlefield on the Rural Radio Network. It's been an interesting week so far in the trade as the kills remain huge. We had a WASDE report of Wednesday. Good to say, not a lot of impact on the livestock, but there are some 148 bids out there. Will they get passed on? We're going to find out that and a whole lot more on today's episode. As you can see, Brad Kooima is joining me. He's with Kooima and Varlick out of Sioux Center, Iowa. So let's start out with those kills. Obviously, still seeing some decent numbers.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks again. Of course, Susan, I always enjoy being on here with you. I think it's not a bad place to start talking about the kills because, there's been a fair amount of dialogue of, well, what about the demand? And the box beef has broke some since, a month or so ago. One of the things that I think I use as a common sense measurement of whether things are okay in the world of packerdom is whether they're killing cattle or not, right? Their first method of helping their margins is to slow down the kill. So when you see this day after day after day of these monster kills, 128,000 again today, yesterday, and the day before, I would say that's just about max capacity that we can do in a day. And so that tells me that either there's enough meat sold out front or the profitability of that is still good enough that they want to keep going. Either one, we'll take it. So I think it's a very the chain seems to be very healthy at this point. So I wondered a little bit about, leading question here a little bit, but, after the setback in the box beef, a couple of the meatheads, and I mean that nicely, that I talk to, regularly, people that are involved in the meat salesman business, right? There was some commentary this morning that, priced where it is now, is probably easier to move it as we move forward into the next season, of course, is the holidays, right? And so, he was kind of actually optimistic that maybe a little cheaper box might actually move a little better this time of year, because it's priced into where we probably could expect some consumption.
148 being passed?
Yeah, so far it is. Right. So far it is here. That was, to quote the market last week, it was a pretty wide range. I always kind of roll my eyes at some of my colleagues in the South, if you would, when I'm at cattlemen's meetings and stuff, they think that cattle is just a commodity, that it's the same price for all the cattle. That is not the way it is here. So last week we traded cattle from 146 to 148, obviously 148 on the kind of high grading kind of cattle because of the choice select spread. Those high choice cattle are bringing a premium, as they should. So, our view this week was that, we would move that range from 148 to 150, so if you maybe have a set of high yield, high grade black cattle, something that's been fed a while, up here we're thinking 150. We'll see if that develops or not here as we finish the week. But early indications still look like the feedlot owner's got a little arch in his back, a little bow in his neck here so far.
Well, speaking of the South, obviously they've been teased with a little bit of rain, which those guys with cattle need right now.
Oh man, I find myself watching the Weather Channel more than normal. How's that for an exciting evening, right? My wife's thrilled, by the way, to see what this weather pattern starts to look like. They've had some light rain through that Panhandle, Western Texas area. Oklahoma still bitterly, horribly dry, and even in Texas where they've had a little rain, you don't solve that kind of a drought with an inch of rain. But it does, to some of the weather gurus here, it does appear that there's a chance that maybe this pattern is starting to change to a little wetter pattern. Clearly, that's going to have some impact, if indeed that's right, on their ability to get some wheat planted and started, and slow down this exodus of the female, where they'll restock pastures and stuff like that. So I think across the north, you're going to see a more normal retention here of cattle, and maybe even holding a few extra heifers to try to rebuild the cows that they've lost the last 2 years. So now we're kind of concentrating on what it looks across the south.
Look at the WASDE report that we had on Wednesday. It's kind of nice to say, okay, it was here, it's gone, did not affect our livestock like it could have.
Well, every time you have a report anymore, my heart's right in my throat. It seems like, and I was glad too that yesterday we got through that without basically a neutral corn number, right? The yield was what they expected, et cetera, and basically closed flat too. So, what was it, 2 days ago? I thought the whole market was driven by the Ukraine-Russia news, right? All of a sudden, we had the wheat go up 65, took the corn with it. buried the feeders, the wreck in the feeders hurt the cattle, so I mean all of this stuff seems to, they're just so connected together anymore that it's difficult. I was glad to see neutral. We'll take that every time.
Real quick here, you talked a little bit at the beginning about the choice selects, but I understand there's a record that's been set with it.
For this time of year, it's a record by a mile. In the 33-34 cent range, choice premium to the select. Average for this week is, I believe, $6.40, and we're looking at over $34 almost. And again, you and I have talked about this, but if somebody has missed this program before, normally the choice select spread is narrow because we've got long fed calves in the north and they've had a lot of days, which creates a lot of grade. And usually when you have too much of something, the spread is less because there's plenty of choice. Or you've got exceptional demand perhaps for choice. It might be a little of both, but I think I probably would put my bet on the fact that because we're so current, and we are in this part of the world, that cattle may weigh pretty good because they've been growing good, but they don't have the days necessary to get a high percentage of choice. And I think that that's supported in the government data. 2 weeks ago, Texas was 58. This week they were 61% choice. Still extremely poor, low numbers. So if you're sitting on some high choice cattle up here in the north, I think you're kind of in the driver's seat for a little bit.
All right. Sounds good. Look forward to catching up with you next week.
Awesome. Sounds good.
All right. That's been this week's Cattle Call. As we always remind you, commodity futures and options do involve a substantial risk of loss, not suitable to all investors. And that's been this week's Cattle Call.